Hello, welcome to another episode of COPCAST. I'm Jason Rodi, coming to you from the Palais des Congrès. Today is December 7th, so it is the beginning of the convention, the official beginning. As you know from the previous episode, they started negotiating many days ago, like 5 days ago, in fact 4 years ago. So now they are they should have, they probably have not, they should have agreed on a lot of the wording, a lot of things that should find itself in the agreement, and they're beginning the real negotiations now. So it's the place is booming a lot more than it was yesterday. So as you know, I'll be meeting with all kinds of people that have various stakes and involvements in these negotiations, and hearing from them, trying to understand really the process, the stakes, but mostly where we're at on a day-to-day basis. So this conference was supposed to happen in China in 2020. So I don't know if I need to tell you what happened in 2020 for it not to happen in China. But now we are co-hosting the conference with them.
I was very excited, and China self-determination has 90% of fish are either fully fished and 69% of wildlife population, land and children, in the ocean.
So the Chinese government has a real involvement in these proceedings, more than any other country other than Canada, really. Well, they stand equal to Canada in terms of their part in the proceedings. I'm just gonna go walk about a bit. Yesterday this was all barren, as you may remember, kind of like a ghost town, and now it's buzzing. So there's all these kiosks. I just wanted to give you a sense of this space here as we arrive at the conference. The negotiations go on upstairs. We're going to go there a little later. Well, let's go there now. Oh. Well, that makes it clear. So why are they protesting? I mean, is it just like as if they're talking to themselves? Not at all. In this case, the people that are walking by those signs are the decision makers, the people that are in these negotiations, taking part in the discussions, and so they really have found the perfect place to make their voices be heard by the right people. I'm going to try to also get some of the action outside. There isn't much of it, but there's a march that I'm hoping to take part in that takes place tomorrow. So something worth mentioning, of course, is the intense security that is present at the Palais and around the Palais. Just as I was coming in, cops came up to me, were following me, asking me what I was doing, and not remaining very friendly, but asking for details, what it is I'm doing, and my answer wasn't sufficient, especially because I was filming, even though this camera is very small. They they just wanted to keep following me and make sure that I'm doing what I'm saying that I'm doing.
You are looking for the entrance?
Oui, exactement.
Ok, vous cherchez que vous filmez pour des archives personnelles?
Non, je suis un média pour la COP directement. Là.
Ok.
Ouais.
Vous allez chercher votre accréditation, c'est ça?
J'ai déjà l'accréditation, mais c'est la première fois que je vais essayer de rentrer, fait qu'on va voir comment ça va aller. Là. C'est par ici, c'est ça? Parfait. Merci beaucoup. Ouais. Et dans mon téléphone. I thought I already had my pass, but that was really a pass to get a pass. And once I got my actual pass, it came with a bag full of goodies, which are essentially masks, one of which I should be wearing right this moment, as well as COVID tests. So every day I need to present a negative COVID test in order to get in here. It's part of the game. That's what everybody is doing. Same thing with my equipment. I've brought minimal equipment, but despite this, I need to drop it off somewhere when I get in. It gets sniffed by dogs for for I don't know what exactly, but it gets sniffed by dogs, and then I pick it up again once I'm in. Right. So someone just asked me to get my mask back on now, which I will do.
So then the chat was introduced. It was champions that are diverse across the they include Nigeria,
Sansasyon.
Hello, lovely people.
Hello.
What's your name and what are you doing here?
Well, we are from Turkey, from the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry, and we are specifically working for the Nature Conservation and National Parks Department. And we are going to be the next host for the COP16.
How is it so far? First day, right?
It's so busy, and I'm trying to orientate myself. I'm trying to understand the venue, understand the schedule of the meetings, and yeah, I'm so excited about that.
So what are you hoping to achieve personally from your time here?
Yeah, I would like to see that we find a common ground about the next decade's biological diversity targets and goals. At the end of the negotiations, probably not, but maybe not in the beginning, but at the end, I believe that we will find this common ground for the biological diversity.
Yeah, looks like we should. It looks like you have a beautiful country as well. I hope I will be at COP16.
Yep. Hope to see you there. Anlaşmak ne demekti? Yok, hemfikir olmak.
So what is your name and why are you here?
My name is Sadia Munawar. I am representing the government of Pakistan. I'm a part of the official Pakistani delegation. And the reason why I'm here is actually to represent Pakistan's perspective on the CBD. There's definitely a global biodiversity framework that is going to be signed. And already the meeting has not officially started as such. It's going to start on the 7th, the COP. Conference of Parties, 15th meeting of the Conference of Parties, but so far we've been having a lot of backdoor negotiations, and there is also a lot of, I would say, discussion around terminologies that are going to be used in the 22 targets that are going to be set. I mean, for example, I'm just giving one example. The part of the group that I was over the past 2 days was particularly focused on 4 targets out of the 22 targets. And although we reached agreement over 3 targets, but one of them we could not agree, a consensus could not be reached over terminology as simple as biotechnology, because there were arguments regarding whether we should be inserting terminology such as the adverse impacts of biotechnology, the benefits of biotechnology. There are parties who felt that the benefits of biotechnology should not be inserted. So disagreement over the term synthetic biology, whether that should be inserted in the targets. So that was really, really interesting.
That's what you're calling the pre-negotiations.
Yeah.
So that when you start on Wednesday, that these things are hopefully already behind you, and you can get down to the itty-gritty and hopefully get to like a signature from everybody. It has to be unanimous, correct?
Of course. It's actually, you've put it very articulately and very correctly. It's supposed to be, this whole exercise is supposed to be cleaning the text of the actual agreement that we're going to sign. So honestly, this is my first experience, and really, I just, there was a lot that I had seen in the television and read in the media, but this is something totally different, because what happens is, in practical terms, there's a lot of lobbying, and there are also different, I would say, groupings within the countries. So it's really interesting to see how negotiations are reached, and sometimes the countries are willing to compromise, sometimes they're not, and it's over very, very simple terms that,
But negotiations between who? Because I would imagine what a negotiation that might be happening between 2 people, doesn't apply to everybody else. So how does that work exactly? There's negotiations even between neighboring countries, or what? What's the stuff that's going on that's not involving everybody?
Yeah. So certainly negotiations even between neighboring countries, negotiations between different regional groups. And
between what?
Regional groups, for example, the Asia and the Pacific, the European Union.
Right.
And it
So
was,
they gather
Yeah.
before and throughout,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
especially throughout these pre-negotiations, they gather, they discuss, so that when they'll be around the table, they can talk in one front, one common front.
Exactly. And one of the purposes is also to clean the text, so that we don't spend a lot of important critical time in doing that.
Talking about semantics or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So that is the purpose, to actually save the time and to build consensus prior to the actual COP. So.
And so you're saying it's your first experience, it's your first COP, it's mine too.
Oh,
So I'm learning here, and from a layman's perspective, it seems that everyone is in good spirit, everyone is very clear about what needs to be accomplished, and everyone seems, from what I can notice from here, everyone seems very willing. Yet the way that I hear about it is that, this is the goals are so high that we can only hope to achieve them, but it's going to be very, very difficult. Is that your impression as well?
I don't think that's my impression. I think we've already, as a developing country, we have already suffered so much, and we've seen that development can be in harmony with the natural environment, with the natural ecosystems. So rather than exploiting the nature and then going back to trying to preserve it, I think it's better to ensure a sustainable approach towards development, towards economic growth. I think both can go hand in hand. So that's the perspective of Pakistan, and that's why we all are gathered here, to ensure that sustainable development that is also does not compromise the needs of the future generations. So that's the whole, I think, perspective, and that's why all the countries are coming together, that now more than ever the need is now to actually come together and build a consensus and work together as a community, as a global community. In the month of April, Pakistan recorded the highest global surface temperature in the world in April. In the same year, we broke another record. We had mega floods in June, July, and that is something what we've been talking about that while as a developing country, we do strive to make achievement, economic development and economic growth, but at the same times, we have to, I would say, suffer damages as a result of climate change, because the climate change was not our doing. Our global average emissions, Pakistan's, is just 1% of the GHG emissions globally. So if we contribute less than 1%, should we be the ones who are one of the most highly vulnerable? We are one of the 10 most vulnerable countries in the world. And just presently, we have lost thousands of billions of dollars, in fact, in damages as a result of this flood. And while we'll be striving to recover from those, and we'll be building not just infrastructure, but also the local economy, the local livelihoods, but who's going to pay for that? I mean, and how that is going to impact the long term, because obviously if you have a highly deprived country, nobody would want, the spillover effects of that. So that's what at this UNFCCC, the Conference of Parties, 27th meeting of the Conference of Parties that was held in Egypt this year, that's what Pakistan was really talking about. And Pakistan was very successful in creating a fund for the climate finance. And that was really, I think, a first after many, many years of negotiations and discussions. So hopefully, I think things are set in the right direction. So it's a first, but I think it's going to take time before things clear out. But at least there has been some progress, significant progress in the area.
Oh, you've been so great. I'm going to leave you alone now.
I would have actually loved to.
Oh no, we'll do it again. We'll do it again.
Sure.
And I'm just going to get your name one more time, if you don't mind.
My name is Sadia Munawar. I am representing the government of Pakistan. I'm from Ministry of Climate Change, government of Pakistan.
Wonderful. Thank you again.
Hi, I'm Aaron Lobo, and I work as a senior advisor, consultant to the Wildlife Conservation Society's marine program in India. These opinions are obviously my own. Yeah.
Right, it's not your organization's opinion. Right.
I'm Shyama Kuriakose. I work with Wildlife Conservation Society in its law and policy program, and these opinions expressed are my own. The important thing that people engaging with this convention need to understand is how this works, how the negotiations work, how it's going to trickle down into the local level, and which is why it's important for us to simplify to the layperson how this is going to play out eventually. So which is why I hope to go back and then create some kind of explainers and simplifying language so that people then can understand more of it. So that's something that is required, because for instance, we meet people around, they wonder, oh, what is this COP15 CBD, and then we have to explain to them that, look, this is what it means, and some of it goes over their head. So it's important for us to engage in a more simplified fashion with the general public so that they understand what their stakes are in this issue.
I mean, that's who we're here for. Yes. We're here for biodiversity, but
it's biodiversity and actually remaining accountable to the ultimate beneficiaries on the ground, who are the communities working very closely with biodiversity. I think this is an important point as well. I'm a marine conservation scientist by background. I currently work as a senior advisor with the Wildlife Conservation Society in India. And we are at probably what is the biggest biodiversity event in the world, which is the CBD COP15.
Why is it the biggest in the world?
I guess some of the most important strategic goals and targets, which are sort of, you can say, the very macro level North Stars that we have to kind of, look forward to are framed in a way, or, discussed, negotiated over years. So it is a very important event on getting like a broad consensus on how the world should sort of strive towards achieving particular targets to kind of save species, habitats, and from the risk of extinction, and at the same time with benefits that are accrued by society.
And why I've been reading this as well, that it's very important, that it's a historic moment. But I wonder, why wasn't it COP14 or why wouldn't it be COP16 that is so important? Why this one more than? Is it just that as well? What's your name?
My name is Shyama Kuriakose. I am working with the Wildlife Conservation Society India as its law and policy person. So I work on laws regarding conservation. And as far as engaging with this particular convention is
Why the importance?
The importance is basically that this is coming after something called the Aichi targets, which happened in 2010. And so 2020 was when it was supposed to be a fresh set of targets, and also to do an assessment of whether the 2010 targets had been met or not. And so, which is why this is a very crucial moment for us. And then the pandemic hit. So the 2020 got delayed to 2022. And so right now we are negotiating a new set of targets, given that the first set of 2010 targets haven't exactly been met.
Okay.
So so on the technicality, I'm not it'll take a while.
Right, of course.
It'll take a while. But there were targets, there were percentages that were supposed to be met. And then given the pandemic, given the climate change COP, the Conference of Parties that has just happened, and the CITES on trade, illegal wildlife trade that has just happened, this also has come in. And so everything is very important at this time because the pandemic had just hit us, and I think the world is ready for a change in its strategy towards things.
Oh, I like that.
So and that's probably why
timely. That's why it's important.
it's timely. It's required at this point because this is a convergence of all international obligations on conservation, on nature positive solutions, and biodiversity conservation, and ensuring that people are at the center of it as well. Communities, societies at the center of it, so that conservation and sustainable development can go hand in hand. So I think, which is why it's important that this convention.
That's why when I see here academia and research,
Yes.
business, media, NGOs,
It has to be a collaboration of different kinds of
Women's
stakeholders.
caucus, youth. You
Yes.
could have as well. I understand there's indigenous voices
Yes.
as well. They may
Yes.
not be represented on this
Yes.
sign, but
Yes. They have events, they have their own side negotiations happening, the indigenous peoples, as to what language should be used, what interests must be met when you negotiate these targets, when you finalize these targets. So it's a consensus building, not just amongst different countries, but also amongst different stakeholders, including IPLCs and local communities, marginalized communities, developing and the developed countries. So there's a whole wide range of stakeholders.
everybody is here. You've come from across the planet, from India.
So yeah, I think basically there's also a very important need for NGOs to align with not just national strategies but also global strategies. So if you're working in a particular direction, it's really important to kind of rethink, realign, and maybe shift to the focus where the North Star is headed. Obviously, you got to contextualize to the local situations as well. Is going to be extremely crucial. And I think that's the reason we are here as observers. Obviously we don't take part in the negotiations, but we are here as observers.
Okay. And are you also beyond observing? I assume you're meeting with people. You're meeting with people from other countries, and I assume that you're learning from that as well. You're not just observing because you could do that through the news somehow. You're also kind of developing relationships, learning what knowledge and somehow assets you could bring home as well, I assume. Yeah.
So the thing is, there are many partners, NGOs that are here, and we're talking to them, and we're taking back lessons from here back to our country to see what is it that we can do to change our strategies, or if there are the negative lessons that we need to also consider and keep in mind when you think of strategies within your country, within that local context. So I think that's important, and that's why I think this exposure is good, meeting people, networking. It's pretty important for that perspective. Yeah. and it gives you a different perspective also, like, because we're coming from what you would call the global south. It's a very mega biodiverse country. So, and then you're also engaging with other mega biodiverse countries, so it's kind of interesting to see how that plays. Yeah, so it's important in that respect, the networking and coordination. Yes.
I think another thing is, one of the things is, taking these important messages back home that come from both civil society as well as, on the negotiations. What are the targets? How are they negotiated? Why are they so important? But also the need to kind of scan globally, but reinvent it to your own situation, or rather reframe it to your own sort of context. I wouldn't say reinvent it, but.
Give me an example.
No, so basically, I think there is, there are these very broad, overarching targets, that are very important, as I said, as a North Star. But every country, every place, it's got its own very specific context, very different, say, geographically, from the socioeconomic point of view. There are so many different background drivers to this, for biodiversity loss, for whatever it may be. So kind of reinventing it to your own reality, or rather recontextualizing it is the right term, to your reality, is...
My name is Dr. Bakari, Jason Mnaya. I'm here to represent my organization. It's called Tanzania National Parks.
Okay.
Yes, I'm working...
You're here to represent the Tanzanian
National Parks. Yes.
Oh, wow, that is...
Yes.
I've visited.
Where?
I visited Tanzania. I've climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, for example. And I know how beautiful your parks are, so it's great that you're here to represent them.
Have you been to Serengeti?
I have. It is beyond words.
So being here is part of gaining skills and sharing our experience with others on what we are doing in Tanzania National Parks to manage the national parks at the year now. The way we do our protection, because of protection against poachers, so we are doing anti-poaching operations. There are a lot of things, conservation needs money. Through conservation we generate money through tourism activities, but also we need more money, we need more funding for managing other activities. Because, for example, if I tell you, we have 22 national parks, and out of them is only 5 national parks that can generate enough fund to even break even their annual operations. The rest of 17, we call them underperforming parks. Most of them just less than 2 years, so they don't generate funds enough to cater for their operations. So they depend on only these 5 parks. So you can see the huge burden that we have. And we, until before COVID, we were not receiving any subsidy from the government. So the organization was running by itself. So
by who?
By itself.
Okay, by itself.
Yes, yeah. But we managed for many, many years. Currently, the government took over. So, but I think when we stabilize tourism has returned now. Maybe we'll stabilize in 2-3 years to come. Then we come back to normal, to sustain our own, to sustain by ourselves through our own generation. The funds that we generate through tourism.
What is your hope? Because you're not going to be raising funds here. You're more here to just express the need to protect the parks, I assume. So, why are you here exactly? You're here to observe, to report back home, I assume, but also, do you have such a large stake in this as well? So what do you feel is your personal mission in being in Montreal at COP15?
My personal mission is to share my experience with others and also to learn from others. But again, we came as a group, so we have a country position on various goals and other issues. So I don't have my own, my own agenda, but Before we came here, we had some preparatory meetings. So we went through all the goals and other things. So we have a position as a country. But personally, is sharing the experience, learning from others, doing networking, so things.
And
I love nature, by the way. That's why I like Canada. Just like when you go to Norway, it's the same. You see all the way they've preserved the environment. See, so they generate a lot of ecosystem services from the preservation of from the preserved environment.
yeah, ecosystem services. That's a new term for me, but such an important term. The services that the environment gives us. That's what it means, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And do you feel that in Tanzania or in Eastern African countries that there might not be, you might not be doing as well?
We are doing the best. Yes, we are trying to do our best. Attract people to sustainably use the resources that we have. For example, cutting the trees for energy. We don't have enough gas. Maybe we can supply people with gas for energy, alternative to cutting trees. And what the benefits that we're getting from what the ecosystem services that are provided by the efforts that we're doing conservation. For example, we have forests, we have national parks like Udzungwa Mountain, we have Kilimanjaro, Arusha, all these are forest national parks. So you know what forests do to the environment, right? Most of them are water catchment areas. So they provide water downstreams, and the water is used for many purposes: electricity generation, agricultural, irrigation, and all that things. For example, if you take Udzungwa Mountains National Park, that park is not very famous for tourists. So we don't generate a lot. It's one of those 17 parks that I say that they are underperforming. So there's not much generated from it, from the park through tourism. But the ecosystem service they are providing is very, very important, because it's the water catchment area, and downstream there are a lot of farms, paddy farms, sugarcane farms, through which you can, and there are a lot of three sugar factories through the agricultural activity that are being conducted downstream. I think maybe we could see that it generates a lot of money, maybe more than Serengeti and Kilimanjaro. But so in conservation, just look at the perspective of what you get from tourism. No, we look into other aspects. What are the ecosystem services that are provided by those national parks? So I just give one example. For example, again, Kilimanjaro, a lot of is another water catchment area, and a lot of water streams going down, through which you generate electricity in an electrical station called Hale, down in Tanga region. Through that, we get irrigation services, so you can see. And the other thing, this is not very, it's new to us. It's not new in the world, but it's something new to us. We generate funds. We expect to generate funds through carbon credit trading. So, for example, currently we are about to start with the Serengeti National Park, in which we're going to do soil carbon.
So how does that work, generating funds from what exactly? From
a carbon credit.
The carbon trade. So that means that if you're saving your forests and basically helping to balance out the carbon neutrality, then there's a possibility of revenue coming from other countries to help pay you for that.
Yes. Yeah, you're very right. For example, for the Serengeti project, we expect to work with Soil for the Future and the Biodiversity Resource Institute. Both are US-based companies. We're about to sign a memorandum of understanding. So we expect to generate like $6 million per year. So that will add up the value of the Serengeti National Park. And we have also, we're expecting to do the same with other national parks, like 5 national parks to start with. The other ones is not a soil carbon, but the upper, we call the above ground biomass carbon harvest. So we have those national parks which are totally new. They had the other status, but now they have a status of national parks. So they are new, not more than 3 years, since they were gazetted to be national parks. They used to be game reserves. So they were under other administrative institute. Mm-hmm. So because we have national parks, we have game reserves, we have forest reserves, and other.
Where does that money, who pays for that? Where does that money come from?
The money comes from the investors. So we have the resource. I say, okay, they pay for to offset the amount of carbon they produce in the industries, in the airlines, and all those. For example, we are going to work with Volkswagen company.
With who?
Volkswagen company.
With the car company.
Yeah, the car company. So they offset. It's like they pay for us the conservation effort that we are doing to absorb the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere through the forests that we preserve, through the grasses and other things.
So you have to work with Volkswagen directly for this?
We don't work with them directly. They work. There's an intermediate companies. Okay. As I told you before, there's
no global fund where all this money goes and then is redistributed.
No, I'm not sure about that. But I know is that we work with the two companies. As I said before, it's called Soul for the Future and Biodiversity Institute. Both are based in the US. Okay. Yes, so we work with them. We have to enter an agreement with them. And how much are we going to earn as a national parks?
You mentioned early in our conversation that you have new parks. Now, is there a kind of incentive for creating new parks, for protecting more land based on the carbon trade?
Incentive, because those are the government efforts. We generate more money, maybe, so it's just to add value to them, right? So we can generate more money.
That's an incentive to me. Yes. That sounds like an incentive.
Of course. That's it. Otherwise, we could stay maybe more like 10 years to make them popular, to make them popular to the tourists and come there. By the way, they are very remote, some of them. Maybe reaching there be very expensive and time consuming. So if we don't get tourists right now, we have that alternative kind of a business that can set you to generate money from those national parks. So maybe if in 3-5 years to come, they can sustain themselves. So they can break even, through the budget that they can break even, maybe through the budget that they have. Because you can have a running budget of like $100,000 per year, but you produce only like $10,000. So you see that deficit. So we think that through the carbon trading, those national parks may bridge that gap. Mm-hmm.
Well, I won't take more of your time, but I want to thank you very much for taking the time with me and explaining where you're coming from and why you're here, really. Yeah, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Can you remind me of your name again?
My name's Dr. Bakari Mnaya.
Dr. Bakari Jason Mnaya. All right, I got it. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
My name is Alice Hughes. I'm here on behalf of China Biodiversity Conservation Green Development Foundation, and I represent them at meetings like these as Deputy Secretary General. I'm also an Associate Professor for the University of Hong Kong. And my work broadly focuses on understanding patterns of biodiversity and drivers of biodiversity change to inform more effective policy and conservation. And this is my third COP basically, though I did attend the first part of this meeting in Montreal last year, and I also attended the meetings in Sharm el-Sheikh and Cancun.
Okay, and so you're at these meetings, if I understand correctly, you're at these meetings to help, to inform people, to make sure people understand these policies.
I'm primarily a scientist, but I'm a scientist who wants to ensure that the work we do actually goes into informing policy, practice and change. And so typically I'll be liaising with parties as well as with other NGOs at these meetings to provide the science that's needed to inform these kinds of discussions. Because if we don't have scientifically based targets, and if we don't understand what we need to be prioritizing, then we're not going to be making the right types of changes or targets or getting the right kinds of prioritization. And so my role is to provide that kind of information and to make sure that when we develop a target, it's what we need to be doing rather than ticking a box.
Right. And what's your feeling about, our chances of...
about this meeting?
Right, about this meeting, to put it simply.
Well, as I said, I've been involved with the CBD for a few years now, as well as with various other UN biodiversity conventions. And it's challenging. I attended the Zero Draft discussion in Rome in January 2020. And a lot of us, especially from the NGO community and the scientific community, were very concerned about the initial drafts of the framework. There were a lot of very arbitrary targets there that weren't hitting the mark, but also were completely random values or unmeasurable. And now, 3 years later, we're still not where we need to be. I just sat in an hour-long discussion where all they managed to do was add a set of brackets. And we are days away from what was meant to be agreeing on a post-2020 framework. And 3 years after we thought we would be doing it, and yet we're not moving in the right direction. And in terms of biodiversity, this agreement is critical. It's critical to mobilizing resources where we need to.
Can you take your mask off at this point?
Yes. It's critical to ensuring that we get the funds where we need them, to prioritize the mobilization of resources in critical areas, and to help build capacity. And we also haven't learned sufficiently from the Aichi targets. Now,
the what?
Aichi targets.
What is that?
So the Aichi targets were a set of targets developed by the CBD and rolled out basically in 2010. They were meant to be completed by 2020, what was meant to be a UN decade of biodiversity, during which we were going to reverse global biodiversity loss. And yet at the end of that decade of biodiversity, we hadn't achieved any targets. One target, target 15, got redefined. So according to a new softer definition, we might have protected sufficient areas, but we hadn't fulfilled any according to the original definition. Yet rather than learning from the process of Aichi and what we did well and what we did not so well, we're here still debating the text. 80% of the text is in brackets. Only 2 targets have been agreed on. And so we're not where we need to be, days away from the COP.
Mean it's in brackets?
It means it's not yet agreed on. So
okay. Let's walk a little
yeah.
more.
So because the CBD is a UN agreement, and the way that it works, given that it's a convention of the parties, is the parties have to agree on text. But where they don't agree on text, they put it on brackets for discussion later. And at the moment, 80% of the text is in brackets, which is a lot to get dealt with in a few days.
And are they hoping to get through or get rid of these brackets by Wednesday or by 2 weeks from now?
Most of them by Wednesday, and then the rest of them by 2 weeks from now. So these few days are meant to be about discussing the framework so we can get rid of as many brackets as possible, and so that discussion during the COP itself can be more efficient. Except if you've been in any of these discussions, a lot of it is still unfortunately wordsmithing, and we don't have the luxury of time to debate words, and yet we are still there. So we're in a very scary place, and there is discussion, at least within the NGO communities. Would it be better to have a weak framework or no framework? Because that is where we are, just days away from the start of the CBD meeting.
it sounds like you're a little, let's go in there if you don't mind.
Pessimistic?
Yeah, it sounds like you're a little pessimistic about the possibility of achieving an agreement by the 19th.
I would not be the only person to say that the only way many of us can see of getting this out is by gutting the text and pulling out many of the most controversial points. So some of the most difficult issues within the text are the 30 by 30 target, which was meant to be the Paris target for biodiversity. So the Paris target was a simple target that the public can understand and get behind. 30 by 30 states that by 2030, we should be protecting 30% of the planet. Now that sounds great, but we didn't make the equivalent, the target 15 for Aichi, which was about protecting 17% of the world's land. And this is particularly challenging in many developing economies. So Africa, most of the African continent, does not like the concept of 30 by 30 because they are still trying to develop. And it is difficult to set aside 30% of your country whilst trying to develop.
Right.
Other major issues include the digital sequence information, so the sharing of basically genetic information, because part of the Nagoya Protocol, which is another really important part of COP, is about sharing benefits. And many countries are concerned that profitable industries will basically have financial benefits that will not be mainstreamed. And so that's another really big issue which may not reach agreement during this COP. And another major issue is funding. There is not sufficient funds for many nations to actually fulfill the agreements, to even have good NBSAPs. Now, an NBSAP is a National Biodiversity Strategic Action Plan. It's a really important tool within the Convention on Biodiversity because it's each country's roadmap as to what do we need to fix and how do we fix it. But even getting enough information for that is really challenging for countries that don't have good research capacity and don't have good funding.
So what you're telling me is that ideally we would get rid of some of these things in order to simplify the framework.
This is likely to be the only way to get through them. So I think that it's not improbable that some things will just be put on the table for COP16, because this is the COP15.
Yeah.
So some will be parked because we can't reach agreement now. If we wanted to get through them, then specific action around them and specific working groups should have been working on text with the parties that were most concerned in very high intensity for months. And that hasn't really been happening, despite the fact we know that they were issues.
They could have taken care of this before coming here.
They should have, because we've known at least since the meeting that happened in Nairobi that these were major sticking points. And I know that in parallel, many discussions have been going on as to, hey, we need to fix these. And yet, whilst there have been friends of the chair groups and other working groups which have been talking around them, they haven't really been doing it at the intensity to find solutions. If rather than the basically the last version of the text from the contact groups, we had special focus on these most contentious issues, then we'd have a lot better chance at resolving them now. Whereas as it is, we basically can only give them as much attention as all of the other less contentious issues, which is difficult.
Right. Well, you've really given me a different perspective than everything I've been hearing all day. But it seems...
I mean, I've been working in Asia for 14 years now, so I have a bit of an on-the-ground perspective as to some of the dialogues that are certainly happening in that region. And Asia is a very, very challenging issue. It's one of the most underrepresented in meetings like these because each region basically will be able to have certain amounts of resources, certain amounts of chairs, etc. But the Asian region, according to the UN, is the whole of Asia, and that has more than half the world's population, every major religion, and every ecosystem. And so even trying to get any form of consensus in our region is really difficult because it's so disparate. And so when you come to meetings like these, you will see that the African group will often have a combined statement. You almost never see that from the Asian region because it's so heterogeneous in basically every way. And in some of the groups I've sat in today, you'll hear various members of the Asian region disagreeing with each other, whereas obviously collaborating they would have a stronger voice. And the ASEAN region has not had as strong a contribution to things like the framework as some of the other regions probably have either.
Right. Would you mind if we spoke again in a few days and then again in a few days?
Yeah, no problem. I'm here for basically 2 weeks, so I'm around and I'm fairly easy to find generally.
And I'll be very curious, Alice, to see
if my perspective change.
Yes.
I'd love it if they did. I mean,
just to see, because you seem to have your hand on the pulse of the real progress going on, you know, not so much the rhetoric of it, but what's concretely happening. So you might be able to give us that
I'm more than
input.
happy to. We've written a couple of papers on various elements of the framework, including the scientific dimensions and also some of the major barriers, because academics aren't nearly as well represented as they should be at meetings like these. You have lots of NGO participation. If you ever go to the research and academia room, it's almost empty because academics don't seem to understand the fact that we can't make good targets without good data. And so I work with a fairly select group of people who try to translate data into policy and understand how we can actually apply our scientific knowledge to help inform more effective targets. So we've been looking because this framework matters. This framework matters to the future of biodiversity, and we need to be putting a lot more attention and focus onto it.
Another day has ended. It's our second day. And I thought I was done filming. I put my camera away and then I got out here and I remembered this feeling I got yesterday. Well, inside there's a real nice atmosphere, collaboration and so on. And then when you step outside, it's been rain. We might be in our bubbles and our talks, inside in our rooms. But when we step out, we hit the fresh air, the fresh Montreal air. The sun has been going down so early every day. Plus the rain. I don't know, it gives an interesting feeling to the end of the day. Yeah, like a feeling of melancholy, something of that sort when we get back into the real world, into the realities of these police officers that are here, and then the citizens that are all around the perimeter. But it's a beautiful night under the rain. And again, I feel so lucky to be a part of this, to be